All right, so we've made it to the final section of chapter 8, and we're just going to talk about things how they are in Southwest Asia today. So one of the things that we're going to mention is that there's been a lot of a population increase in Southwest Asia, and this population is slightly greater than the United States. But keep in mind that this is not just one country. As a whole region, its population is greater than the United States. Population has been mainly affected by the availability of water, petroleum, and how that's becoming more of an increase in what is used throughout the world has also, helped have an influence on population. So there are about 330 million people that live in Southwest Asia. Some countries that have bigger populations are like Turkey and Iran. As we already mentioned, oil is huge business, and some are experiencing population boom. So like as a whole, Southwest Asia is increasing is slightly increasing in population. So there's been a lot of urbanization. I think because of the oil, they do process some of that, and that's, creating jobs. So people are moving into the cities. But then some countries are not this way. So like Afghanistan is much more rural, and I think it's a lot poorer as well. So, but as a whole, the population is rapidly growing. Some of the countries really have a lot of wealth because of this. So what you're seeing in this picture is the largest building in the world, and that's in the United Arab Emirates in the city of Dubai. So it's called Burj Khalifa. It's massive, super expensive to build. That kind of shows that wealth that comes from oil. A lot of people want to live near water, right? Just because water is a precious resource. Away from those areas, you get to drier areas. But there's definitely this contrast between the old and the new. Even more traditional values that focus on Islam in cities like even Dubai. So I had a cousin that traveled to Dubai several years ago. Very modern, advanced city, but she had to wear like something covering parts of her body, especially when you go into a mosque, which is an Islamic place of worship. That was like completely required. But usually just like walking around the street, you didn't have to do that. But definitely there's a contrast between the old and the new. We've talked about the Bedouin here before. They are this group that live in the deserts, and they herd animals, so they kind of migrate around. The largest ethnic group in Southwest Asia is the Arab people. They are the ones that speak Arabic. So it's actually the number one language too. There's other groups that exist. There's the Jewish people that live mainly in Israel. There are the Kurds that have a kind of a population in Turkey, Iran, and Iraq. But Arabs is that dominant group. This is what Arabic looks like. It's a super important language. Even really important texts like the Quran, which is the Islamic holy book, it is in Arabic as well. So that's what their alphabet looks like. Definitely there's like interesting mix of ethnic backgrounds. And then this is a significant sentence right down here, that many people in Southwest Asia identify more with the ethnic groups that they're a part of than the country that they live in. So they may not see themselves as an Iranian or an Iraqi or a Turk as much as they would see themselves with the ethnic group that they're a part of. So that's significant. Whereas most of us would think of ourselves as an American before we think ourselves as based on our heritage, I guess. Islam is the major religion in Southwest Asia. Yes, there is Christianity, there is Judaism, but most countries are Islamic, and there are two branches of this. There's the Sunni and the Shia. We're not going to go into too much detail about those, but there's been a lot of tensions between those groups in the past. They don't often get along very well. 75% of Israel practices Judaism. Christianity represents about 40% of the population in Lebanon and in Syria, and 10% in Syria. So not a real, I mean, Christianity is more found other places outside those areas, Europe, the United States, South America, Mexico, places where we find that. So then we're going to go into a little bit about, I know we've talked about some of these religions already, but just to kind of talk about that a little bit more. So they go to mosques. That's their holy place. This is a mosque here. There's a really famous one in, there's a couple of really famous ones. There's a famous one in Mecca, which is the holy city in Saudi Arabia. That's where Muhammad was born. And that's where people make that pilgrimage at one point in their life. There's another one called the Dome of the Rock that's in Jerusalem, and that's really important too. Women have to wear this hijab, I believe is how you pronounce that. It's this head covering. Sometimes they even cover, really everything except their eyes, and just as an act of modesty. So that's a requirement for women. This is the city of Mecca. This is the Kaaba, I believe as it's called. It's cube. And in it, there are like holy relics, holy artifacts. I think that there's maybe even something all the way from back to the time of Abraham that they claim in there. There's some kind of a black rock that's in there as well. And I can't remember the story connected with those things, but tons of people gathering here. So really important part of their faith. And they actually walk around that cube in like a pattern. It's kind of interesting. So I think that's just during the month of Ramadan. We talked about Judaism. There are about 14 million Jewish people throughout the world today. We just covered talking about the Holocaust, which did reduce the population significantly, about 6 million people during the Holocaust. You will often see this little circular cap that Jewish men will wear on the back of their head. And then maybe you've seen the menorah, which is the candles that are lit during Hanukkah. Hanukkah is not the most important holiday to Jewish people. It's one we are familiar with because it occurs during like the Christmas season. But Passover is probably the most important holiday to Jewish people, remembering the exodus of Moses leading the people out of captivity in Egypt. There's another holiday, Rosh Hashanah, I believe I'm saying that correctly, and that's like the Day of Atonement. So atonement's like the forgiveness of wrong deeds. So that's big in a lot of religion, is not being found guilty of something, whether it's Christianity or Judaism or something. So, Christianity, about 2 billion Christians worldwide. There are different types of Christians. So you've probably heard of like Catholics. That is one type of a Christian. Eastern Orthodox is similar in a lot of ways to Catholic, as far as they have like priests and things like that. But it's usually in a different part of the world, Eastern Hemisphere. There's the Greek Orthodox as well. And there's Russian Orthodox. So there's like lots of Orthodox, but they're very similar to Catholic in a lot of ways, but they don't recognize the Pope as the head of the church. And then there is, you probably learned about the Reformation last year. There's Protestantism, which kind of broke off from Catholicism. Usually this is where you have like ministers or preachers, denominations like Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist. Those would all be considered under Protestant. Christmas is obviously a very important holiday to Christians. Easter celebrates the death and resurrection of Jesus. So that's those two are the kind of like the most important holidays for Christians. Religion and arts has been a thing throughout history. Whether that's Christian art where you might see crosses and things like that, famous scenes. Maybe you've seen the one where I think it was by Michelangelo, Sistine Chapel. Like God is stretching out His hand to touch the fingertip of Adam. That's a pretty significant one. So religious depictions have often been famous. But even in Islamic art, it's important. So this is kind of like an example of Islamic art. Islamic art cannot show the human form, so you will see a lot of mosaics and stuff like that, but you won't see like pictures of actual people. This kind of goes into talking about folk tales, 1001 Nights. I don't know if you're familiar with that story. Is that maybe where the story of Sinbad comes out of that? I think. So I think kind of what it goes is like somebody's telling the story, and like every night, the king is gonna like kill them or something, but they keep telling a story, so they only tell part of it, and the king like lets them live the next night, so they keep telling the story that keeps going on. So that's a story that comes out of this part of the world, 1001 Nights. See what else we got here. Religion obviously plays a significant role. Islam is the major religion. I think I already said that. It does affect a lot of ways that people behave, as far as like with Judaism and Islam both restrict diets. Neither one of them eat pork. They also have other things that they can't eat as well. I think Islamic people refrain from drinking alcohol in any context. There's other things as well, like I said, about the women covering their head. So one of the things you'll notice is that a lot of Islamic countries, women do not have the same types of freedom as men. Women driving a car, you know, it is allowed, I think, in some contexts. We're going to look some of that in class. I have a friend that was from here in Bloomington that lived in Saudi Arabia for several years, and just it was kind of interesting to see her perspective on what it would be like to be an American woman living in another country. Here you can see some women that have their heads covered. Like I said, that's kind of a part of it. Ramadan is this holy month, typically in the fall. It takes place, and they fast from dawn to dusk every day. So it's a long time to be without food, but it's a very holy time. Then they break that fast with this other 3-day celebration at the end. Oil is really important. We've talked about that already. And the Persian Gulf has experienced great wealth because of that. It's brought many challenges, though. You know, there has been some countries that have been invaded. We talked about Kuwait was invaded by Iraq. There's been some tension between Iraq and Iran. So just control over these precious oil areas has created a lot of attention in the area. A lot of countries have struggled with their oil dependency and trying to reduce that dependency on foreign oil. The United States is one of those. To lessen the dependency on oil, exporting countries have invested money in other industries like alternative energies. So using things like solar power, like cars like the Tesla, which are electric, that's reducing our dependence on foreign oil. So that those have become things that have affected because the cost of oil is high. There's been a lot of conflicts between Arabs and Israeli people in places like Palestine. The Arab Spring, which I think I had you write that down in the last section, was this time of like the protests and uprisings in like the 2010, 2011 timeframe. So that's significant. They've tried to be increasingly free elections. I think this is a woman that just cast a vote. I think that's why she's got ink on her fingers. I believe that's what's going on there. I'm not totally sure if I remember that's what's going on in that picture. But some, changes have been made. The scarcity of water has been a big issue, and many countries don't want rivers to be dammed like the Tigris and Euphrates because they're afraid it's going to reduce the flow of water in those areas. They depend on those. So I think that talks about fossil water, which is one of the terms that you had to find. So this is where it says the Tigris and Euphrates, recent decades, they tried to dam the river, but many are in protest of that in Syria and Iraq because they're afraid that they're not going to have, access to that water. So just a couple of things to wrap up here. There's a lot of wealth in this country due to oil, but some countries like Afghanistan are one of the poorest because it's much more rural. Islam is the dominant religion. There are two branches, Sunni and Shia. The main Islamic holiday is Ramadan. The main two holidays in Judaism are Hanukkah and Passover. There's also Rosh Hashanah, which is an important one. Arabs are the largest ethnic group in Southwest Asia, and Arabic is the most spoken language in this area. And then three more. The population of Southwest Asia is growing rapidly as a whole. Many people in Southwest Asia more identify with their tribe than their nation. And finally, places like Syria and Iraq oppose the building of dams along the Tigris and Euphrates because they're afraid they'll lose access to water. So those 10 things, you need to kind of pause the video right now and write those 10 things down. They will all appear on your chapter test, and that will be your notes for this video. So that will do it for this one. Thanks for watching.